specific mathematical shapes such as rectangles, triangles, etc. The pen tool, just here, it's similar to both the line tool and the pencil tool, but you click to draw one point and then click again to draw the next. It's kind of like shape drawing on Photoshop, and you get all these different points, and you can close the object at your starting point, and it should connect the lines and draw your object like so. Having all these different anchor points basically allows you to rotate on curves by dragging, or set the point of rotation on a corner point just by clicking on it. I don't tend to use the pen tool. I tend to use the pencil set on smooth, because I think it's the best of both worlds. You can draw objects in the fashion that you would with a mouse, and the smoothing isn't so much that it looks like a really detailed picture, and it isn't so straight that it looks like a geometric shape. You also get options down here to smooth and straighten, which will basically smooth out or straighten out the object. And you can also do this on modify, the modify tab at the top, and then go to shape, and you get extra options there. See how on the properties you also get the line thickness and other different options that you can play around with. I'm not going to explain the draw circle tool, that should be pretty obvious. It just draws a circle with a fill inside it. The square is pretty much the same, but note this option you get here where you can set the corner radius. This basically allows you to input points. I'm going to use 8 points. So instead of drawing a straight square, you can see how the corners have rounded off. And the last drawing tool is your brush, and if you look on your options you can choose a brush size. I'd recommend going on one before the actual smallest size, because if you try drawing an object with a small brush and you've got a lot of fancy curves going on, sometimes it doesn't actually close the shape. So unless you're accurate with a mouse or you have a graphics tablet, I'd use the second one down, and also try and zoom in twice before you start drawing, because it'll just be a bit more accurate. When you actually zoom out to your maximum size, you'll see that it looks a lot cleaner than if you'd drawn it at the maximum zoom out. So you can see that's the lines are quite clean on the edges there. You can also choose different types of brush on the pull down menu just below that. There's ones that are on a slant that are quite good for calligraphy and square brushes, etc. And if you look on your properties where you can choose the colour, which you can also do on your colours, you'll see smoothing options. Now you might want to play around with these, but I keep it on 50 because I find the smoothing is basically how Flash smooths out your object as you're drawing it on the curves, etc. The text tool, that should be fairly self-explanatory. Click once to start typing, and then this little white circle, or it's sometimes a white square, you can drag this out to define the actual margin, the point at which it will start a new line of text. And then on the properties you can choose various options such as the size of font, bold, italics, how the text aligns, the different fonts, etc. And it's static text. There is dynamic and input text, but they're mainly for use on games and programming. So you can just text randomly, and you'll see where I've actually defined the thickness here, how it starts a new line. And you could, in theory, select part of the text, such as those two letters there, and play around with the actual colour or even the font or the size. And still within the same text window, you can have different colours and different options, or you could start a new text box if you wanted it to be separate from the first one. Right, the last few options. You have an ink bottle tool, which is like a fill bucket tool, but it's for pencil strokes, so you could choose a colour and then a fill-in fills at different points. And then you've got the fill paint bucket tool, which is for filling objects with paint or solid fills, whatever you want to call them. So select a colour and then look at your options just here. Where it says gap size, that basically means if there's a gap in your actual drawing, such as here, it'll struggle to close that gap because it's not quite sure what you're referring to. So if your object doesn't have gaps, i.e. it's closed, such as these teeth, you should be able to fill quite easily. You can always zoom in to see if there's any gaps going on anywhere. You may have also noticed this lock fill button on the options. This generally applies to gradients, which I'll show you now. On your colours just here, if you go down to the bottom, you should see some preset gradient swatches, and you can actually add or create your own swatches. So if you look on your colour mixer where it says type, you can change it from solid to linear or radial. Linear and radial gradients are similar in how you use them, but the look of them is different. For instance, if you were to do a pipe that had a bit of a shimmer on the rounded parts of the cylinder, you might use a linear gradient that fades from dark grey to light grey to dark grey. Or if you were drawing a solar body, you might have a radial gradient that has a bright yellow colour on the inside, and on the outer bounds of the circle you might have a darker yellow or orange or something like that. So for the mouth area, I'll just show you how to create your own gradient. You basically get different colour swatches on your actual gradient, so you can replace these colours by choosing another one. You can even add colours to make it more complicated, and it will always give you a demonstration of the colour you're creating at the bottom. And you can use these sliders, alpha, RGB options to modify the colour. So for instance, if I wanted something transparent, I'd be playing around with the alpha. Now, do you remember I mentioned the lock fill button? Well, if that is locked, this colour here, it'll try and spread how it's arranged as if it was filling a bigger object. So if I click there, it doesn't look much like this gradient I've got here. If I uncheck the lock fill button, and then if I hold my click to actually fill the object, now it knows that the object is this shape, and this little circle here where I'm dragging to, I can put that anywhere to mark the actual centre of the shape. So I could just click it anywhere, and it gives you a bit more of an option. You can also use the gradient transform tool, which is just here, and then click your gradient, and here you've got a more accurate way of defining how that colour is going to spread. Now, if I wanted to store this colour in my actual colour mixer or my colour swatches so I can use it frequently throughout the actual project, you could use your eyedropper tool, which you can use on strokes and fills, and then click your gradient that you want to copy, and then on your colours on your tools, if you actually click for the colour, you'll see that it's stored at the bottom on a new swatch, so you can add all different colours to your heart's content. The last thing I'm going to go through is the erase tool just here. Just before I explain a couple of things on the panels to the right. The erase is pretty self-explanatory. It's just for erasing anything on your stage. But you can also get extra options which are similar to your paintbrush options. On this little tab here, you get a pull down menu, so you can choose how the paint is spread, or concurrently how the eraser actually works. So if I wanted to erase just the actual paint on this, and I wanted to keep the lines, I could erase like so, and it'd just get rid of the paint and not the actual strokes. You can also define the size of your eraser, but you should be familiar with that. Now on the right you've got your library here. This is for storing all your different symbols and sounds, etc. I tend to create folders to store the objects and give them relative names, so I know exactly what I'm dealing with and where it should be, everything in its right place. And this little panel at the bottom, it's kind of like your free transform, but it uses math, so if I click something it tells me that that's the 100% as it's being shown now. So I could make it smaller, half the size, 50%. I could uncheck this constrain option here to modify either the X or the Y. So if I change the height on the Y axis to 75, you can see how that changes. You can also rotate manually, for instance 45 degrees, or skew 180 for instance, and you can see how that modifies. So if you know exactly how you want to transform something, transform panels for you, you'll probably find you use that when you're working with symbols, etc. The info basically displays the size of the selection in terms of dimensions, which you can also see on your properties. And a line, if you click this little button here where it says to stage, then you can use these different buttons to actually move your selection to a specific point on your work area. So that covers the basics of all the different tools. It should be everything you need to know to actually get started drawing stuff. So in the next stage we're going to actually move on to creating symbols, and we're going to get cracking with some animation. So thanks for bearing with me, and we'll progress nicely in the next episode. Thank you for your time.